Good afternoon. I'm Sean Hansen with Kiefer Consulting. Joined here today with Gloria Simas with Cover California and Matt Green with Kiefer as well. We have the opportunity to present better processes leading to better communication and our journey with Cover California. Our agenda today, we're going to cover the weekly status report. This was my big moment. Who does weekly status reports? Who likes doing weekly status reports? Right. Okay. So we're using this as a sample project to talk about really the process of innovating and transformation and working together to deliver good results. So it's a small project, and as people are talking about agile and iterative approaches, etc., highly recommend biting off something small, something you can chew on, and learning the processes, techniques, and then being able to grow from there. Some people, they want to take on child welfare system. Me, I'm just doing status reports, so we'll start there. We're going to talk about the historical process, what were the pain points, problems, challenges, and then we're going to talk about the path to improvement, our 5 steps that we took and recommend anybody adopt. And then Matt's going to show the solution. And the solution is nice, it's elegant, it's user-centered, and really focus on meeting their needs. So with that, let's go ahead and go into Gloria talking about this wonderful weekly status report.
So our weekly status reports begin with individual staff members submitting their accomplishments for the week. The supervisors then aggregate those reports and submit them to managers. The managers further aggregate the reports and provide them to the department leaders, which then gets rolled up to a departmental report and provided to senior leaderships. The challenges we faced were receiving reports timely. Supervisors had to send out weekly reminders, or I would personally walk around to individual desks and request the reports. The process was email-driven, arriving in varying formats. Some were embedded in email. Sometimes the reports came through in an Excel or Word attachment. It became difficult to combine the various formats that we received from the staff members. Since people don't group tasks the same, it became hard to summarize. Also, it was difficult to identify project risk or issues, or the key accomplishments, or versus the day-to-day work. As you can imagine, or possibly experienced yourself, this is a very time-consuming process. So, which then leads us to the path to the process improvement, how we got there.
Yeah. So like Gloria was just saying with the challenges, these sort of things I think everyone really they see within their own processes, right? And so the idea is, before we jump ahead to actually show how we've kind of corrected them, we kind of wanted to show the steps we took and sort of some keys to success in order for us to get there, right? So with that, I'm going to hand this back over to Sean.
So every project and engagement is a journey. So along this journey, we really talk about engaging with the users and all of our core stakeholders. Going from there, an iterative approach, right? Always iterate and improve. And then, again, going back to that user experience, it's the what's in it for me factor, making sure that we deliver key features and functionality that excite and engage our users. And then promote buy-in. And ultimately is do continuous improvement. I'll say it 3 times, but it was funny as we were preparing for this session and walking through the demos, Gloria would say, you know, I'd like it to do this. I'd like it to do that. And it's wonderful. That's the next iteration of the project. So with that, let's go ahead and we'll talk about the engagement with the team. And they did bet that I couldn't stay sitting for the whole session, but so we'll see if I get that $5. We worked with the team to identify the current state versus the desired state. What were the changes and challenges that we saw? It was a pain. It was a mess. It wasn't done in a timely manner. People were forgetting things, missing things. Poor Gloria and her peers had to walk around every Friday. What's the status of this? I'm missing your update. People are on vacation, and we need to apply updates, et cetera. And this ultimately rolls all the way up to executive sponsors at Cover California. So it was really critical that this gets done right at the outset. We, one of the key things that we like doing as we look at this is that path is really going to a minimum viable product. Has everybody thought about the minimum viable product or used it, engaged it? I like the analogy historically when we're designing cars and thinking about what is my goal. In this little quick side story, we're talking about The dream is, my objective is, I need to get to the grocery store, buy my groceries, put them in the car, be able to get home and make dinner. In the dream, I'm driving a Ferrari to the store. Maybe these days I'm driving a Tesla, and it's beautiful and looks pretty, and I'm going to be able to go there really fast. But as we walk through the minimum viable product story versus traditional legacy, say, waterfall development methodologies, go ahead, Matt, is historically we had this process through which people would spend 6 months designing the tires, then the chassis, and then the body of the car. And in each of those phases, we don't have anything working that's going to get me to the store, let alone get me groceries, get me home. And then ultimately, a year, et cetera, down the road, when I've got a beautiful requirements document and wonderful design document, and 2 years out, I've got a car that's going to get me back and forth. So as we look to embrace the iterations and the minimum viable product, we really look to say, my goal, what is the user's need? What do they need to accomplish? They need to be able to get to the store, get their groceries, get home. So we came out, our little first iteration, it's like a skateboard, right? Gloria could ride it to the store, get home, get her groceries, not satisfied. But we got the basics. Get the wheels on, get a platform for moving. The next iteration, so as we progressively elaborated the product and added new features, sort of analogous to a scooter. She was able to go to the store, hang the bags on the handles, be able to get back home. Still sort of satisfied. But what we found out with, and the product demo that Matt's going to show today, is really, it's a bike. All that she really needed to do is, as you look at the core user engagement, core experience that she and her team and all of her direct reports needed, was be able to get there, get back in a timely manner. And so we delivered the bike. We're going to iterate on the bike. She doesn't need the Ferrari. And so when we talk about these iterations, I think that a lot of people find that you had that dream and that vision that is a 2-year path to get to this ultimate Ferrari. When your core needs are getting to the store, getting back quickly, you can deliver way faster, way cheaper, frankly, and with a lot higher degree of client satisfaction earlier in the process. So I use that story. I like they get to the store and the MVP model to help illustrate this iterative approach here. I think that probably throughout the day you've probably seen this quote, that a study of 6,700 failed projects, 4 out of the 5 key contributing factors were tied to using waterfall methodologies. Anybody agree? Come on. All right, Bradley agrees. I like that, Bradley. And we're working with Covered California, right? This is the affordable care for the state of California. So the fact that they're iterating on internal projects and process improvements and their deliverables is a fundamental shift in how we do things. So through these iterations, we focus on having the team look and identify the features that they need. We make sure the solution is meeting those business needs. We avoid that big bang that would have delayed the project a long time. And we adapt as and when necessary. And we always have, it's always customer-centered, and it's always about the user experience, which transitions to the next slide, which is that user experience. As we're working on other engagements to foster iterative approaches and agile in state of California IT projects, user experience is first and foremost. If you're not delivering a solution that is going to be used and usable by your target users, you're not delivering a solution. And so here we really focus on, sometimes it's sizzle, sometimes it's process flow, but this is about the what's in it for me. We need to promote them buying in and having key things that they're going to benefit from, again, whether it's line staff or the executives and everybody in between in that communication path. So it is a natural progression to the buy-in, and promoting that buy-in along the way. We start with a small team. We prove that the solution works. Then we rolled it out a little bit more to a wider audience, and then we recognize their ideas for innovation, for changes, bake those in, and we communicate the value across the broader organization. And then continuous improvement. I opened up my discussion about that and working with Gloria on this deck and saying, if it did this, it would make my job easier. And it's like, great, let's do that Wednesday, once we're done presenting. And so we're excited to have the opportunity to work with them and continuing to improve that. So with that, I'm going to hand over the keys to success, this model, to Matt, and he's going to walk through what did we do, what was the experience and the solution.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, so the idea, before we jump into actually seeing the demo, I kind of want to talk about how we applied those keys to our work at Cover California to be able to actually take you through the steps of designing this solution. So not only will you see what the final solution should look like, but I'll take you through the thought process in using those keys. So to start, when we first started with the solution design, we really relied on the keys to success to ensure that we had a viable design from the very get-go, right? So I first made sure to sit down with Gloria and be able to understand what their current process was and the challenges they had with those. And then those challenges actually helped us define what that future state process would actually look like. So we were able to compare that future state and the current state, and using those challenges, be able to identify the specific parts that we really need to focus on to be able to make an improvement to the process. To successfully automate the process, it is really important to have sort of a well-structured input. That way you can create controlled, predictable outputs, right? So the current process, like Gloria talked about, it really sort of lacked that structured input. And so we knew that that was one of the key challenges for us to be able to have some success to this, is we needed to address that. And we also understood that because of that lack of that input, it was a large cause of the manual work that her and the other supervisors were stuck doing. So to also succeed, we needed to understand that our stakeholders were more than just Gloria and the managers, so the supervisors and the managers. We had another group entirely, and that was Gloria's staff, right, who were actually the primary contributors to the system, right? So this meant that we needed to be able to get the staff users buy-in in order for the solution to work. Because if we built a process and they weren't willing to use it, then it was a failed process, right? It's not going to work. So to ensure buy-in from the staff, we really made sure to put the user experience and the usability as a key requirement in our design. And we knew that we needed to create a solution that would simplify the process for the staff users just as much as the supervisors. And to do this, we really needed to make sure that we got those staff users' feedback into how we could improve that data input, right? So from the very start of the project, we also aimed for this iterative sort of continuous development approach. And that was actually strongly influenced by the initial project timeframe. We only had like 2 to 3 weeks to get an initial product out the door. And so that definitely had a very strong influence into it because of the need for that quick delivery, right? So we knew we would more likely to succeed with a minimal viable product where we could take advantage of those agile development practices to ensure that we had the flexibility to make quick changes as we gathered more feedback from her team. So this agile approach actually influenced our choice in technology as well, right? So we wanted to make sure that we used technology that both the users and the developers had some familiarity with in order to sort of minimize the training and the ramp-up time that was needed for this small engagement. And this led to us to decide on using basically 3 main technologies, and that was SharePoint, Nintex, and then a custom grid solution that Kiefer has built for them previously. So we chose SharePoint because it was widely adopted within the organization already. So the users were familiar with it. They were already sort of doing their day-to-day work with it. It was something they knew and understood. So it was really easy pick for us. On top of that, we chose Nintex Workflow and Forms for a lot of the same reasons, but also it was an investment that the organization had already made. And so they were already embracing it in their day-to-day operations. But then beyond that, it was also, for my own personal development purposes, it's a very rapid development tool, and that's done because of its simple sort of in-browser design elements that it has. And so it kind of fit right into the nature of what we were trying to do with it. And then finally, we chose this custom grid solution, again, for some of those same primary reasons, 2 of which being it was an existing technology that we had built out for them before. And the second reason, which to me was the strongest, was we were using the custom grid solution for the actual manager roll-up portion of it, and the managers were already familiar with it because we had built out a project status dashboard for it. And so that was the one way that we could really ensure buy-in from the managers, was having them get introduced to this process in a manner that they were already familiar with. So the actual improved weekly status report process ended up looking a little bit like this, and hopefully you guys can see that on the screen. But at a high level, the flow really didn't change that much from the old process. But however, remembering our primary focus was to automate and to reduce the overall process time and to sort of address the challenges that Gloria had talked about of the old process, we focused improvement on the areas where we would really have the most impact on those problems. So those were things like how the staff users inputted their data, and sort of the menial small tasks that the supervisors and the managers had to do to basically ensure that the process was completed correctly. So improving these sort of areas would significantly reduce the time it would require for the whole process, and that was kind of key. So, so just to show you, give you an idea of how this process was built out, it had a number of different sort of automated workflows included in that, and the first one was basically with new status report tasks being created automatically at the very beginning of the week, which we can see under the Monday slide here. So essentially, this removed the need for sort of manual work from any of the users. So they had a action item ready and waiting for them in their list when they came in at the beginning of the week. And so we took that sort of setup and we totally automated it, so there was no need for anyone to really have to worry about making sure they were there waiting for anyone. So coming back to our other slide here, the status report tasks that I was just describing, it was also, we provided a real clean and uniform way to submit the user data on there, and we did that through defining real defined sections on the form, so that way they could really know where their accomplishments were, where their goals were, what their risks and issues were. So that helped us sort of address that structured data input. In that case, it really went a long way to making sure that we were able to have an output that fit the needs of the organization. And so we also improved that usability for the staff members by really allowing those accomplishments and those goals to be able to be tagged for reoccurring events. And so tagging something as reoccurring identified it as sort of a repeat work item, meaning the staff members would likely be re-entering that information week after week after week. And so the process now allows them to tag it, and essentially it will seed that information into their next week's task for them, basically eliminating the need of having to repeat work week after week in their status report entries. So that was, again, a usability thing that we've implemented just to make the lives of the users a little bit easier. We did other things like auto-populating fields on the form. That way staff users just had one or two less clicks to make. And it's interesting to note that those small but extremely useful improvements were really all thanks to the feedback that we had received from communicating with our team. So if we hadn't sat down with our team, because during our minimal viable product, we didn't have that stuff in there. And we sat down with them after the fact, and they came back to us with feedback saying, hey, it'd be a lot easier if I could do this. This is how our work process works often in this area. And we were able to take that feedback and then implement some additional changes to the process that made their lives a lot easier, which went a long way into getting their buy-in in the solution. So after that, we did a couple other workflows that were to actually improve the work of the supervisors and the managers, right? And so we can kind of, again, see that on here. And the first of those workflows that helped improve the supervisor's workload was one that was triggered the day before the actual process occurred. That's the aggregation report process. And that workflow was basically a late notification workflow. And the way that worked was previously Gloria would have to go around and try to ask everyone, have you done your work, have you done your work? Now we eliminated that completely, so now all that stuff is handled through an automated workflow. So the workflow goes through, knows who has and hasn't completed their items, sends an email to that staff user the day before, and just very friendly reminder saying, hey, you need to have this completed, here's a link to your item, go do your work and mark it as completed when you're done. And so in that case, we've completely eliminated that need of work from the supervisor in that area, right? So beyond that, we actually provided extra insight for the supervisors. So the actual day of, Friday morning, the day of the process, the supervisors are notified via workflow as well with an email, just giving them basically a summarized list of all the individuals on their teams who have completed their items and all the individuals who haven't completed their items. And I'll show you examples of this in just a minute. But the whole purpose of that is, again, rather than having her go around and have to collect that information from individuals, she's given the data right from the get-go, and she can make decisions and choices from that right away. So if she knew that one of her users happened to be out for the week, she would see that on the list, have that as a reminder for herself, and then she could take that final step of action against the process. So the final improvement that we implemented was pretty much the largest, and that was in regards to reducing the time spent on the process for the supervisor's work, right? So we entirely eliminated the need for the supervisors to manually aggregate all that data from their team together and to be able to produce that report. So the last workflow in this process, it basically does all of that for her. So basically it will go and aggregate all the items from all the users, sort them and organize them by work area, and then bucket their accomplishments and their goals and their risks and issues across her team members into a unified report for her. And so this drastically reduced the workload for the supervisors, because obviously the task before for her was sorting through emails and trying to decipher what this person meant by that and this person meant by that, and then merge it all into a concise sort of unified language for her manager. Now this is all done automatically through this process. And so it really allowed for a lot less work on the supervisor side on top of the improvements that we made for the staff users.